My name is Lena Whitcomb, and the night my mother-in-law called me a gold digger at my own wedding, her secret messages were already waiting on the screen behind her. Vivienne Crestwell smiled at 200 guests and said I was not our class, that I had married up, that women like me always knew how to find rich men with soft hearts. Then she looked straight at me and called me a charity bride in a designer dress. I did not cry. I did not answer. I only watched the screen blink behind her, because every insult she threw at me was dragging her closer to the proof she had paid to hide. Welcome back to Pure Drama Stories, where family pride, public humiliation, hidden betrayal, and quiet revenge come together inside one emotional journey. Tonight, you will hear how one bride stayed silent while her mother-in-law tried to destroy her name, until the wedding slideshow began telling the truth. Now let me take you back to where it really began. Before the champagne, before the cruel speech, and before Vivienne Crestwell learned that the woman she called cheap had already seen every part of her plan. I met Nolan Crestwell on a rainy afternoon in Portland, inside a small coffee shop where I was editing floral layouts for a corporate event and pretending my life was more organized than it really was. He came in with rain on his coat, a dead phone in his hand, and the kind of tired smile that made him look less rich than lonely. He asked if he could borrow my charger. I said yes. Then he asked if the seat beside me was taken. I said, only by my bad decisions when I'm overworked. He laughed, and somehow that small laugh became the first soft thing in a week that had been full of bills, deadlines, and cheap grocery dinners. Nolan was not what I expected from a Crestwell. I knew the name before I knew him. In Oregon, people like the Crestwells did not need to introduce themselves loudly. Their last name was already printed on hospital plaques, charity boards, private school buildings, and old society photographs where everyone looked expensive even when they were pretending to be casual. Nolan worked with his father in commercial real estate, but he talked more about old buildings than money. He listened when I spoke. He remembered the name of my mother's library branch. He asked questions that did not feel like tests. For almost a year, I believed love could be simple if two people were honest enough. Then I met his mother. Vivienne Crestwell lived in a white stone house at the end of a private road, the kind of home that looked less built than inherited. She opened the door before Nolan could ring the bell, dressed in cream silk with pearls at her throat and judgment already in her eyes. She looked me up and down, smiled without warmth, and said, "So this is Lena. Not welcome. Not nice to meet you. Just that. So this is Lena." At dinner, she asked about my family in the careful way some women ask questions when they already think they know the answer. Did my father own a business? No, he had been a mechanic before he died. Did my mother still work? Yes, at a public library. Where did we usually spend summers? We did not spend summers anywhere. We drove to the coast when gas was cheap and came home with sand in our shoes. I was not ashamed of any of it. My mother had raised me with dignity, discipline, and a kind of quiet strength that no country club could teach. But Vivienne wanted shame from me. She kept reaching for it, smiling each time I refused to hand it over. After dessert, while Nolan and his father Warren talked near the fireplace, Vivienne walked me past a wall of framed family portraits. She stopped beneath one of Nolan as a child on a sailboat and said, "The Crestwells have a way of life, Lena. I hope you understand that marrying into a family like ours means learning certain standards." I looked at her and said, "I understand standards." Her smile tightened. "Good. Because affection is charming, but compatibility lasts longer." That was the first warning. Not a scream, Not a scene, just a silk-covered blade pressed gently against my ribs. For the next few months, Vivienne never missed a chance to remind me I was being allowed into something above me. She called my job creative but unstable. She called my apartment sweet for a young woman starting out. She said my mother was very brave for still working, as if paying bills were a tragic character flaw. When Nolan proposed, she did not congratulate me first. She called and said, "I assume Nolan has explained what this family requires." "He told me he loves me," I said. Vivienne sighed. "Yes. Nolan has always been sentimental." That was how she treated our engagement, like a temporary fever her son would recover from. She chose the reception venue before I could suggest a garden wedding. She called my dress simple. She corrected the flowers, the seating chart, the menu, even the way my mother's name appeared on the invitation. Every decision became a small courtroom where I had to prove I was not cheap, not desperate, not reaching for something that did not belong to me. Some humiliations are loud enough for everyone to hear. Others are quiet enough that only the target feels them. Vivienne understood that kind best. She knew how to insult me in ways Nolan could excuse as stress, tradition, or misunderstanding. He defended me sometimes, but softly. A hand on my back, a whispered, "Mom, stop," an apology in the car after dinner. I accepted those small defenses longer than I should have, because love can make a woman patient with things that are slowly making her smaller. Then Kendall Royce came back into the picture. Kendall was Nolan's ex-girlfriend. Beautiful, polished, old money, and exactly the kind of woman Vivienne believed belonged beside her son. Nolan told me they had dated because their families expected it, not because they truly chose each other. I believed him. But Vivienne mentioned Kendall the way some people mention a better house after you have already signed a lease. "Kendall always knew how to move through our world," she said during a cake tasting, slicing her fork through vanilla buttercream. "Some women don't need to be taught." Nolan said, "Mom?" Vivienne lifted her brows. "What?" "I'm only saying comfort matters." Comfort. That was one of her favorite words. It meant class, money, breeding. A woman who did not make Vivienne explain the rules because she had been born inside them. My best friend Hadley Monroe hated her immediately. "She doesn't want a daughter-in-law," Hadley said one night while helping me fold wedding programs. "She wants a family-approved statue with a trust fund." I laughed, but the laugh did not stay. Deep down, I could feel something coming. Vivienne had grown too calm, too pleasant. She no longer looked like a woman trying to stop a wedding. She looked like a woman waiting for the right moment to ruin it. That moment arrived 3 weeks before the ceremony through our wedding planner, Macy Ellaway. Macy had been hired by Vivienne, so I did not fully trust her at first. She was sharp, professional, and always 2 steps ahead of the disaster. But unlike Vivienne, Macy did not confuse money with morality. She asked me to meet her privately at a small bakery downtown. When I arrived, she had her laptop open and an untouched coffee beside her. Her face told me something was wrong before she said a word. "Lena," she said, "I need to show you something. After that, you decide what happens." She turned the laptop around. At first, I saw emails. Vivienne's name, Macy's replies. Schedule changes I had never approved. Cake cutting delayed by 15 minutes. DJ cue after Vivienne's speech. A private guest arrival through the service entrance. A hotel room booked under an assistant's name. Then I saw Kendall Royce's name. My mind slowed down, as if it needed time to protect me from the full shape of what I was reading. Vivienne had contacted Kendall. She had offered money. She had arranged for Kendall to enter the reception before the cake cutting, crying, implying that Nolan had promised her something, creating just enough scandal to humiliate me in front of both families. Not enough truth to stand in court. Just enough poison to spread through a room. Then I saw the message. Make Lena look like what she is. A girl who found the right last name and grabbed it. I read it twice. Pain does not always feel like fire. Sometimes it feels like ice water poured slowly down your spine. I stared at the screen and understood that my wedding had never been a wedding to Vivienne. It was a stage. She had chosen the flowers, the room, the guests, and the timing, so there would be nowhere for me to hide when she made me look cheap. Macy watched me carefully. I'm sorry. Why are you showing me this? I asked. Because I plan weddings, she said. I don't help women destroy other women and call it family. That was the moment I stopped hoping Vivienne would change. Hope can be noble, but sometimes it is only fear wearing a softer dress. I had spent months trying to be patient, graceful, and worthy enough to make Nolan's mother see me as human. But Vivienne never wanted to see me. She wanted to define me before anyone else could know me. Macy gave me everything. Emails, screenshots, schedule notes, the hotel booking. A short voicemail Vivienne had left after a charity lunch, her voice low and careless. She needs to learn, Vivienne said in the recording. If she is embarrassed badly enough, she may leave on her own. Nolan will hurt for a month, then he'll thank me. I listened once. Only once. Then I called Kendall. She did not answer the first time. On the third call, she picked up and said, "Who is this?" "It's Lena Whitcomb," I said. "We need to talk before you walk into my wedding and lie for Vivienne Crestwell." The silence on the other end told me everything. We met the next morning in a hotel lobby far from the Harrington Club. Kendall looked perfect at first glance, but fear had cracked the surface. Her hands trembled around her coffee. She told me her father's business was failing. She told me Vivienne had made it sound like Nolan still had doubts. She told me she was angry and embarrassed and desperate enough to listen. I let her finish. Then I asked, "Were you going to lie?" Her face crumpled. "Yes," she whispered. "Not about everything, but enough. Enough. Enough to make people whisper. Enough to make my mother lower her eyes. Enough to make Nolan hesitate before he defended me. Enough to leave a stain on a day that was supposed to belong to love." "You should be ashamed," I said. She nodded, crying quietly. "I am." "Then prove it." Kendall looked up. "Tell the truth," I said. "Not to me, to everyone she wanted to fool." She was afraid. Of course she was. Vivienne had power in their world. She could close doors with a lunch invitation and ruin reputations with a smile. But Kendall finally agreed. Not because she was brave from the beginning, but because shame can sometimes become a doorway if a person is willing to walk through it. Macy helped us prepare the slideshow. Not something dramatic, not cheap revenge music or flashing red warnings. I wanted it clean, controlled, undeniable. It would start exactly as Vivienne expected. Nolan as a child, family vacations, graduation, country club dinners. Then the screen would turn black. A date would appear, then messages, transfers, instructions, a short piece of audio, Kendall's recorded statement. Hadley wanted me to cancel the wedding. "You can leave now," she said, standing in Macy's office with red eyes and folded arms. "You don't owe those people a performance." I stared at Vivienne's message on the screen. Make her look cheap. "She invited 200 people to watch me fall," I said. "I think they should see who built the stairs." Hadley exhaled slowly. That is terrifying. I know. Good. The wedding morning was bright and cold. My mother zipped my dress in a quiet bridal room overlooking the garden. She touched the fabric at my shoulder and said, "You look like yourself." That meant more to me than beautiful. She had never liked Vivienne, but she had respected my choice. That morning, though, she looked at me in the mirror and asked, "Are you safe?" I took her hands. "I will be." Mothers hear the storm inside small answers. She studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "Then I trust you." The ceremony itself was almost peaceful. Nolan cried when I walked down the aisle. Real tears. His hands were warm when he took mine. When he said his vows, I believed him. That was the complicated part. I loved him. Revenge sounds simple from the outside, but it rarely is. Sometimes the person you love is standing too close to the person trying to destroy you, and he does not understand the danger until the room is already burning. We said, "I do." Then we walked into the reception. The Harrington Club glittered under chandeliers. White roses climbed the columns. Champagne moved across the room on silver trays. Vivienne wore ice blue silk and pearls, smiling like a woman who had never lost control of anything in her life. She kissed Nolan's cheek and touched my arm with 2 cold fingers. "Lovely dress," she said. "Thank you." "Simple," she added. I smiled. I've always liked honest things. For 1 second, her eyes sharpened. Dinner began. Warren gave a short, kind speech. Hadley made everyone laugh without threatening violence, which was a personal victory. Nolan leaned close and whispered, "You okay?" I looked across the room at Macy, calm in her black suit with a headset tucked behind one ear. "Yes," I said. "I'm okay." Then Vivienne stood. The room quieted before she even reached the microphone. That was not love. That was power. People listened because Vivienne had trained them to listen. She thanked the guests, praised the flowers, spoke about legacy, family, and the responsibility of joining a name that meant something. Then she turned slightly toward me. "Lena may not have grown up in our world," she said sweetly, "but my son has always had a generous heart." A few nervous laughs moved through the room. Vivienne smiled wider. Some brides arrive with old names, family estates, and a natural understanding of rooms like this. Others arrive with ambition. And ambition, with the right guidance, can almost look like grace. My mother lowered her eyes. That nearly broke me. Not the insult. I had expected the insult, but seeing my mother sit in that room while a woman in pearls tried to make our whole life sound like something shameful, that lit a cold place inside me. Nolan half rose from his chair. "Mom, enough." Vivienne laughed softly. "Oh, darling, don't be dramatic. We're family now. Family should be able to speak honestly." Honestly. That word from her mouth was almost impressive. She lifted her champagne glass. "And now, before the cake cutting, I prepared a little family slideshow, a reminder of where Nolan comes from and what it means to join the Crestwell family." She turned toward the screen like a queen unveiling a portrait. The lights dimmed. The first photo appeared. Nolan at 6 years old on a sailboat. People smiled. Another photo, Nolan at graduation. Then Warren and Vivienne at a charity event. Family Christmas portraits. Everything normal. Everything exactly as Vivienne expected. Then the screen went black. White words appeared. 3 weeks before the wedding. Vivienne stopped smiling. The first message appeared. "Make Lena look like what she is. A girl who found the right last name and grabbed it." The room inhaled all at once. Vivienne turned toward Macy. "Turn that off." Macy did not move. The next slide appeared. A bank transfer, a hotel booking, the revised schedule, Kendall's entrance instructions, then the message Vivienne had sent like a woman ordering flowers. Come in before cake cutting. Cry hard. Make her look cheap. I'll handle Nolan. Nolan went pale. Vivienne whispered, "This is illegal. Not false. Not I didn't do this. Illegal." Even then, she cared more about being exposed than about what she had done. Then her own voice filled the room. She needs to learn. If she is embarrassed badly enough, she may leave on her own. Nolan will hurt for a month, then he'll thank me. A glass dropped near the bar and shattered. The final clip played. Kendall appeared on the screen, seated in the hotel lobby, face pale but voice clear. Vivienne Crestwell paid me to come to the reception and create a scene. I was supposed to imply Nolan had misled me and humiliate Lena in front of both families. I agreed at first. That was wrong, but the plan was Vivienne's. The lights came back slowly. Then Kendall walked in through the side entrance. Not crying, not acting, just walking into the truth she had almost helped destroy. "I'm sorry," she said to Nolan. "You didn't deserve this. Neither did Lena." Nolan stared at her. "Is it true?" Kendall nodded. "Yes." Vivienne snapped. "You pathetic little fool." And there she was, the real Vivienne. Not elegant, not protective, not wounded. Just angry that the person she had bought had found a conscience. Warren stood. I had never seen him move with that kind of certainty. He walked to the microphone and gently took it from Vivienne's hand. She resisted for half a second, but he leaned close and said something I could not hear. She let go. Warren faced the guests. "I owe Lena and her mother an apology," he said. "So does this family." Vivienne hissed, "Warren, don't you dare!" He looked at her, and in that look was a whole marriage finally running out of silence. "No," he said. "I should have dared years ago." The room went still again, but this time the stillness belonged to him. He turned to me. "Lena, I saw enough to know something was wrong. I called it stress. I called it personality. That was cowardice. I am sorry." An apology does not erase the wound, but it names the hand that helped leave it open. And sometimes that is the first honest thing a broken family has ever said out loud. Nolan came toward me. His face was white with shock and shame. "Lena," he said, "I didn't know." I believed him. But belief did not erase every dinner where he had asked me to be patient. It did not erase every soft defense when I had needed a wall. He had not planned the knife, but he had left me standing too close to it for too long. Vivienne tried one last time. "This is manipulation," she said to the room. "Lena has always been ambitious. I warned everyone." That was when I took the microphone. I did not shout. I did not need to. The proof had already raised its voice. "Vivienne," I said, "you called me a gold digger at my own wedding. You said I married above my place. You said women like me know how to find rich men with soft hearts." Her jaw tightened. "You were wrong about one thing. I did not marry Nolan for his family name. I married him in spite of it." Nolan closed his eyes. I looked toward my mother, then back at Vivienne. My mother raised me without estates, without private clubs, and without a name that opened doors before she touched the handle. But she raised me with dignity. You have spent your whole life mistaking money for value, and tonight everyone in this room saw the difference. Vivienne's face hardened, but she had no clean place left to stand. "You wanted this room to remember me as cheap," I said. "Instead, it will remember you as the woman who paid for a lie because the truth made her feel powerless." I handed the microphone to Macy. Macy looked toward security and said, "Mrs. Crestwell will be escorted to the private lounge." Vivienne laughed. "You cannot remove me from my son's wedding." Warren said, "Yes, we can." Security did not drag her out. That would have given her a scene to hide inside. They simply walked beside her, calm and professional. Vivienne understood that fighting would only make the humiliation worse, so she lifted her chin and walked out with her pearls shining at her throat and her reputation bleeding behind her. As she passed me, she whispered, "You will regret this." I smiled. "No, you will." The reception did not recover, and maybe it was never supposed to. Some truths are too heavy for music. Guests whispered. My mother held me in the bridal suite until I finally let myself shake. Hadley paced in heels like she was ready to fight the entire Crestwell bloodline. Macy brought water. Kendall stood outside the door until I asked her in. She looked smaller than before. "I returned the money," she said. "Warren said he would donate it." "Good," I said. "I'm sorry." This time I nodded. "Then don't ever let another woman buy your shame again." She cried, and I let her. Forgiveness is not something you perform because someone finally tells the truth. But I no longer hated her. Kendall had been weak. Vivienne had been deliberate. There is a difference. Nolan came in last. For a moment, he looked like the boy from the slideshow, lost inside a family he had never fully understood. I wanted to go to him. That was the hardest part. Love does not disappear just because humiliation becomes public. Hearts are not switches. They are houses, and even after a fire, some rooms remember warmth. "I'm sorry," he said. "I know. I didn't know she would do that." "No," I said. "But you knew she was hurting me." He flinched. I did not soften it. "You knew she looked down on me. You knew she insulted my mother. You knew every dinner made me quieter on the drive home. And you kept asking me to understand her." He sat down slowly. "I thought I was keeping peace. You were keeping her comfortable." That sentence did more damage than any shout could have. I looked down at my ring. It was still beautiful, just heavier now. "Nolan, I love you," I said, "but I will not begin a marriage being grateful that you believed me only after a screen proved I was telling the truth." "What do you want me to do?" "Choose," I said. "Not tonight, when everyone is watching. Choose tomorrow, when she cries. Choose next week, when she says I trapped her. Choose when defending me costs you something." He nodded, tears in his eyes. But I left with my mother and Hadley that night. People expected a bride to collapse into her husband's arms. They expected love to swallow accountability because weddings train people to worship happy endings, even when the truth is still bleeding. I went home in my wedding dress instead, sitting in Hadley's passenger seat while my mother held my hand from the back. At a red light, Hadley looked over and said, "For what it's worth, that was the most elegant destruction I have ever seen." I laughed then. A small, broken laugh. But it was mine. The aftermath came fast. Vivienne resigned from 2 charity boards to focus on family matters. The Harrington Club suspended her event privileges after Macy filed a formal report. Warren moved into the guest house and hired his own attorney. The Crestwell friends adjusted their loyalty with the speed of people who had always known what Vivienne was but only admitted it after it became safe. Nolan called every day. I did not always answer, but when Vivienne claimed the slideshow had been fake, Nolan sent the evidence to the family himself. When she said I humiliated her, he replied, "You plan to humiliate my wife." She told the truth. When she threatened to cut him off, he said, "Then that's your choice." The first time he told me that, I cried after hanging up. Not because everything was fixed. It was not. I cried because the man I had needed before the wedding had finally arrived, and I had to decide whether late was too late. 3 months passed before I moved in with him. 3 months of counseling, boundaries, hard conversations, honest apologies. Nolan separated his work from Vivienne's influence and apologized to my mother at her kitchen table. "I let my fear of conflict become your daughter's burden," he told her. "I won't do that again." My mother studied him for a long time and said, "See that you don't." That was her way of forgiving him halfway. Vivienne never apologized. People like her rarely do, because apology requires standing in a room where they are not the victim. She called me manipulative. She called me vindictive. She called me the kind of woman she had warned everyone about. But once a person's cruelty has been seen clearly, their insults lose their power. They become noise from a locked room. A year later, Nolan and I held a small ceremony on the Oregon coast. No chandeliers, no society guests, no speeches about legacy, just my mother, Hadley, Warren, Macy, and a few people who loved us without making it feel like debt. I wore a simple dress again. This time, nobody said simple like it was an insult. Before the vows, Nolan took my hands and whispered, "I should have protected you sooner." "Yes," I said. "I'll spend my life knowing that." "Good," I said. "Then spend it differently." And he did. Not perfectly. Nobody does. But honestly. Vivienne wanted my wedding to become the night everyone learned I did not belong. Instead, it became the night everyone learned exactly what kind of woman she was behind closed doors. She thought money could buy a lie, class could perfume cruelty, and a bride from a smaller life would be too grateful to fight back. She was wrong. I was not grateful for humiliation. I was not lucky to be insulted in silk. I was not cheap because my mother worked for a living, and I was not ambitious because I loved a man with a famous last name. I was simply the woman Vivienne underestimated. And on the night she invited 200 people to watch me fall, I stood still, let the screen light up behind her, and watched her perfect world learn my favorite kind of lesson. Not the loud kind, the lasting kind. Before we walk away from Lena's wedding night, I want you to sit with that room for a second. Not the flowers, not the chandeliers, not the champagne glasses lined up like everything was elegant and perfect. I want you to imagine the silence after Vivienne's own words appeared on that screen, because that silence was not empty. That silence had judgment in it. It had shock in it. It had the sound of people realizing they had been smiling at the wrong woman all evening. And that is what makes this kind of revenge so powerful. Lena did not throw a glass. She did not scream across the reception hall. She let Vivienne's own cruelty stand up and introduce itself. And honestly, that is the part I respect most about Lena. She knew something many people learn too late. When a cruel person is desperate to perform, you do not always need to interrupt the performance. Sometimes you just need to make sure the right audience is watching. Vivienne thought the wedding was her stage. She thought her money, her family name, her social power, and her polished voice gave her permission to decide who belonged and who did not. But Lena understood the room better than Vivienne did. Vivienne brought reputation. Lena brought evidence. And evidence, when it is clean enough, does not need to beg anybody to believe it. Let me ask you something. Have you ever seen someone insult another person in a way that sounds polite on the surface? That is exactly how Vivienne operated. She did not say, "I hate you." She said, "You come from a different world." She did not say, "You are beneath us." She said, "Our family has standards. She did not say, "You are poor." She said, "Nolan has a generous heart." That is high-class cruelty. It hides behind manners. It wears pearls. It smiles for photographs. And because it sounds refined, people often let it pass. They tell the victim, maybe she didn't mean it that way. But she did mean it that way. That was the whole point. The insult was built to wound Lena while giving Vivienne room to deny the blade. That is why I think this story hits harder than a simple shouting match. Vivienne's violence was social, not physical. She was not trying to bruise Lena's skin. She was trying to bruise her identity. She wanted Lena to enter marriage already apologizing for herself. Think about that. The wedding had not even ended, and Vivienne was already trying to train Lena into a smaller version of herself. A woman who would be grateful for basic respect. A woman who would accept humiliation as the price of joining a rich family. A woman who would measure every sentence, every outfit, every family visit against the question, do I belong yet? And that is where Lena's silence becomes interesting, because silence can be dangerous in two completely different ways. Sometimes silence is fear, sometimes silence is survival, and sometimes silence is strategy. Lena's silence at that reception was not weakness. It was timing. She knew if she defended herself too early, Vivienne would twist the room. She knew if she cried, Vivienne would call her unstable. She knew if she shouted, people would remember the shouting more than the evidence. So she did the one thing Vivienne did not expect from a woman she considered beneath her. She stayed composed. She let the insult land. Then she let the truth answer. But I do not want us to make Lena into some emotionless revenge machine. That would be too easy, and honestly, too false. She was hurt. She was humiliated. She watched her mother lower her eyes while a rich woman tried to turn their entire life into something shameful. That moment matters, because when someone insults where you come from, they are not only insulting you, they are insulting the sacrifices behind you. They are insulting the parent who worked late, the bills that got paid slowly, the vacations that were small but honest, the clothes that were worn carefully, the dignity that survived without applause. Vivienne thought Lena had arrived empty-handed because she did not arrive with estates and old money. But Lena arrived with something Vivienne could not buy, a backbone built by real life. Now, let's talk about Nolan, because this is where the story becomes uncomfortable. Nolan did not plan the cruelty. He did not hire Kendall. He did not write those messages. But was he completely innocent? I do not think so. Not in the deeper sense. Nolan loved Lena, yes. But love without protection can become a beautiful excuse. He knew his mother looked down on Lena. He knew the dinners were painful. He knew the comments were not harmless. And yet, for too long, he chose soft correction over real confrontation. He said, "Mom, stop," when he should have said, "You will not speak to my future wife that way." That difference is everything. So here is a question for you. Is it enough for someone to love you privately if they leave you exposed publicly? Because that is the question sitting underneath this wedding. Nolan's love was real, but his courage was late. And late courage still matters, but it also leaves damage behind. I appreciate that the story does not hand him an easy rescue moment where one speech fixes everything. Lena does not fall into his arms just because he finally sees the truth. She asks him to choose later, when the room is gone, when his mother cries, when the family whispers, when defending her costs him comfort. That is mature. That is painful. And that is exactly how trust is rebuilt. not through one dramatic apology, but through repeated choices when nobody is clapping. Kendall is another interesting piece. She could have been written as the easy villain, the jealous ex who walks in to ruin the bride, but the story gives her a more uncomfortable role. She was weak. She was selfish. She almost sold another woman's dignity for money and social pressure. That is ugly. But she was not the architect. Vivienne was. Kendall still had to answer for her choice, and I like that Lena did not comfort her too quickly, because sometimes people tell the truth and still need to sit with what they almost did. An apology is not a magic eraser. It is only the first honest sentence after a dishonest act. Macy, the wedding planner, might be one of the quiet heroes of the whole story. She had every professional reason to stay silent. Vivienne had money. Vivienne had influence. Vivienne was the kind of client who could make one phone call and damage a career. But Macy understood the line between managing a difficult wedding and becoming part of someone's public destruction. That line matters. In real life, many cruel people succeed because bystanders keep calling cruelty, "not my problem." Macy decided it was her problem, not because she was family, not because she owed Lena anything, but because there are moments when basic decency has to become action. And Warren, his role is complicated too. His apology was powerful, but it came after years of silence. When he said, "I should have dared years ago," that line carried weight because it admitted something most passive people avoid admitting. Silence is not always neutral. Sometimes silence becomes shelter for the person doing harm. Warren may not have been cruel like Vivienne, but he benefited from not challenging her. He kept the peace, and that peace cost other people their dignity. His apology mattered because he finally named his cowardice. But the story also reminds us that late honesty does not erase early silence. It only begins the repair. The strongest part of the revenge, in my opinion, is that Lena did not try to become Vivienne. That is important. She did not fight class arrogance with trashy chaos. She did not humiliate innocent people. She did not invent a lie to beat a liar. She used the truth. That is why the revenge feels satisfying instead of petty. Vivienne wanted to create a false image of Lena. Lena responded by revealing the real image of Vivienne. There is a moral difference there. One woman manufactured shame. The other exposed it. And think about the symbolism of the slideshow. A family slideshow is supposed to be soft. Childhood photos, graduations, vacations, a visual history of love and legacy. Vivienne wanted to use it as a quiet reminder that Nolan came from more than Lena did. But the slideshow turned into a mirror. That is almost poetic. The same screen meant to display family pride displayed family rot. The same room meant to celebrate status became a room of accountability. Vivienne wanted everyone to look at Lena and ask, "Who does she think she is?" Instead, everyone looked at Vivienne and asked, "Who have you been this whole time?" There is also a deeper American social tension running through this story. Class performance. In America, people often pretend class does not matter because they do not want to admit how much it shapes rooms. Vivienne never had to say, "You are poor." She said it through venue choices, dress comments, seating charts, and family history. She weaponized taste. She weaponized tradition. She weaponized the idea of our world. And honestly, that phrase, "our world," might be one of the cruelest phrases in the story, because it says the door is closed before the conversation even begins. It says you can stand in the room, but you will never own your place in it. But Lena's answer is not, "Please let me in." That is why she wins. She stops asking for entry into Vivienne's world and forces Vivienne's world to face its own ugliness. That is a huge shift. The victim stops auditioning. The judge loses the bench. The woman who was supposed to feel lucky becomes the only person in the room with real dignity. Now I want to ask you, as the audience, what would you have done in Lena's place? Would you have canceled the wedding the moment Macy showed you the evidence? Would you have confronted Nolan privately before the ceremony? Would you have walked away without giving Vivienne the public exposure? Or would you have done exactly what Lena did? Let the woman who planned your humiliation experience the truth in the same room she chose for your shame. There is no easy answer. That is what makes the story worth discussing. Revenge can protect dignity, but it can also cost peace. Lena chose truth over a beautiful lie, and that choice changed every relationship around her. I also think the ending is stronger because Lena does not pretend everything is healed immediately. A lot of stories rush forgiveness because audiences like closure. But real emotional justice is slower. Nolan had to prove himself after the guests went home. Warren had to face the damage he allowed. Kendall had to carry the shame of almost becoming a weapon. Vivienne had to live with the one thing she feared most, public knowledge. And Lena had to decide who she was after being attacked on a day that was supposed to be sacred. That final smaller ceremony on the Oregon coast matters because it gives Lena back what Vivienne tried to steal. Not just a wedding, but a choice. The first ceremony was invaded by class, control, and performance. The second one was built on truth. No chandeliers, no society guests, no speeches about legacy, just people who had earned the right to stand there. That is not just romance, that is restoration. Lena did not need a bigger wedding. She needed an honest one, and maybe that is the real emotional center of this story. Not revenge for the sake of revenge. Not public humiliation just to make the audience cheer. The real center is dignity. Lena's revenge works because it gives dignity back to the person Vivienne tried to strip it from. It gives dignity back to her mother. It gives truth back to Nolan. It gives accountability back to a family that had hidden behind money for too long. So when we remember Lena standing in that white dress, watching the screen blink behind Vivienne, we are not just watching a bride get even. We are watching a woman refuse to let someone else write her value in front of a room full of strangers. We are watching a quiet kind of power, the kind that does not need to shout because it has already prepared the truth. And Vivienne? She lost because she misunderstood the difference between control and strength. Control needs fear. Strength can survive exposure. Control panics when the screen lights up. Strength stands still and lets everyone read. That is why this story stays with me, because some people spend their whole lives curating an image, and then one honest moment ruins the portrait. Vivienne spent months planning a public wound for Lena. In the end, she only revealed the wound inside herself. If this story made you think about family, dignity, public humiliation, or the quiet power of truth, tell me in the comments. Was Lena right to expose Vivienne at the wedding, or should she have walked away before the ceremony? And if you want more emotional revenge stories with deep commentary, hidden truth, and powerful justice, subscribe to Pure Drama Stories and come back for the next one.